You are listening to episode 24 of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about raising creative kids and giving kids the space to become creative. I'm going to share a little bit about some things that we do with our kids, as well as a few things that I feel like my parents did to instill creativity. My name is Lisa, mom of 6 and creator of the blog and YouTube channel Farmhouse on Boone. Join me as I share with you my love for creating a handmade home from scratch cooking and a little mom and entrepreneur life along the way. Now I want to start with a bit of a disclaimer because I feel like anything I listen to that has to do with parenting, whether it be a book or listening to other influencers, has the tendency to create guilt and make people inadequate inadequate. If I'm sharing something and saying this is the ideal situation, this is how I would instill creativity on a daily basis, please understand that there are times when life is too busy and too crazy, and maybe all of those things don't happen, and that is okay. Nothing about this should make you feel inadequate. If you're in a season of life where you just feel overwhelmed, then just take this with a grain of salt and know that there is plenty of time. If you just had a new baby, I'm kind of in that phase right now where life just feels a little bit crazy, but there's plenty of time. This is over the long haul to instill these kind of things in your kids. So no bad feelings, no mom shaming, that kind of thing. All right, so let's dive in. I think I came up with 9 things that I feel like help to contribute to more creative kids. The first one is a non-demanding schedule. I feel like whenever life is so scheduled out, we have all of these sports and different activities that there isn't enough time to be at home and be creative. We limit our kids' activities very intentionally. Each child has one thing. So the girls have gymnastics, the boys have swimming lessons. At one time, one of our boys had jiu-jitsu, and it just wasn't for us. It wasn't his thing at all. But that is the extent of it. And we actually have it planned out so that it all happens on one night of the week. We go to town, I get groceries, the kids have their activities. Of course, that's subject to change, but that's how it's working out right now. And we like that because the last thing I want to do is have an environment where my kids have some kind of activity or some kind of project they're thinking about creatively and they have no time to do it. Having a ton of time at home where you just have to either be really bored or think of something to create fosters that time where one can have the opportunity to be creative. I have to tell you that whenever I look at a week and I see that there isn't much on the schedule, at least Monday through Friday, it makes me so happy. It feels like, okay, I can actually accomplish something in this week because I'm going to be home. And when I'm home, I make dinner, I make blog posts, I clean the house, fluff it, make it pretty. I create, and that is the only way I can do it is just by having that really laid back schedule. The same thing goes for the kids. They have so much space to do that, whether it is just to be outside and figure out how to have fun on the playground. That schedule that isn't jam-packed really allows that time to do that. So the next one, this ties pretty much into the first one, is allow them to be bored. Creativity usually happens out of boredom, out of necessity. Whenever I'm bored, which never ever happens, but if I were to be bored, I could think of all of the things I would make. I would sit down at my sewing machine and come up with some kind of dress pattern and make something beautiful for our home. This is something that I did a lot whenever my girls were little at nap times. Without having a smartphone at the time, I really didn't have a whole lot to do other than take care of the house, which I usually tried to do when they were awake. I only had 2 kids. I would sit down and make all kinds of designs, and it was really a time that my mind could flourish and think because I was bored. And we like to do the same thing with the kids. This, of course, demands that I bring up screen time. I've had a lot of people ask me about how we deal with that. There are days that are better than others. In my absolute perfect world, I would prefer to have no screens ever, but we allow them to watch shows on occasion. My oldest daughter has an iPad, but we limit the access. We don't let her carry it around all day, which she would absolutely love to do. There are limited times. They listen to a book before bedtime at night on a book app that we have. It's a read aloud thing. We usually will let them, at least the girls, watch a show with me before bedtime, whereas the boys don't. We don't really have set times, but we just try to limit it as much as possible. A lot of times we will hide devices. So my boys do both have a Nintendo DS, but we will hide them. I have lost them and forgotten where they were because I hid them so well for months at a time. So actually, I think we're currently missing both DSs. They're definitely around this house somewhere, but the longer they're missing, the happier I am. I like it whenever it's a surprise, they find it, they come across it, and then woo, we have the DSs for a few hours, and then I get sick of it and hide them again, never to see them again for a few months. So is this always perfect? No. There are times in life where we have to rely more on the screens than others, and I think that is just fine. I remember plenty of times whenever I had 2 or 3 little kids before Luke was home to help me, getting ready to go somewhere and putting on Peppa Pig for the kids while I curled my hair and did my makeup, and that just made for a peaceful morning. Yes, back in the day, they didn't have that, and that's a bummer for them because it sure makes life a lot easier. But for the most part, I prefer to limit it. I can tell you that. I just feel so much better when the kids have to think of their own fun, because they eventually do. Now, right away, let's say that you just went through a season, maybe the week after you had a new baby or first trimester of pregnancy or something where the kids had to rely more on screens. There's this period of time after that where they sit there and complain and whine and they don't really know what to do with themselves, but their kids are creative, kids are resourceful. Give them a little bit of that time and they'll bounce right back into being normal kids and thinking about things to have fun. I've even heard a lot of moms say that after they detox their kids from screens, if they've been on screens a lot, they actually find that kids are a lot easier because they know how to create their own fun for themselves and be creative. I found the same. I found that if we are relying more on screen time, we have whiny, complaining kids, but the more that they have time to be bored and are forced to create their own fun, they do. They'll do it readily and easily, and it seems like they're having a lot more fun. They just didn't know they would. They're just like adults where they like the easier fun. So the default would be the TV, would be the iPad, but if you take it away, they realize that there's other fun things. It's kind of like me. Before bed at night, I just prefer to zone out and turn on Netflix. But if that was taken away from me, night 2, I promise I would enjoy reading the book. Now, I'm not so good at forcing myself, especially because I watch like half an hour of TV a day before I sleep. So I'm not that worried about it. But if someone like a parent came in and took that away from me, I'm sure that I would enjoy 30 minutes of book reading time before bed just as much, or 30 minutes of designing something or writing out some kind of list or plan or doing something creative. We also love to send the kids outside with no purpose at all, and they come up with things. The other day, my boys both had hammers and they were making something on the playground. They were manipulating their environment and adding on to the playground, turning it into something more. And that was just as a result of, okay, now we're outside. We got to think of something to do. We have to create or we're going to be bored. And kids don't do boredom. If they're bored, they figure something out. And so it's a major step in fostering creativity. Another thing is we don't have a ton of toys in our house. And I find that the less toys we have, the more that they will be creative with what they do have. So in our boys' room, we have a set of blocks and a set of train tracks. We try to keep pretty much everything else out of there. Things come in, we send them out. But I find that if that's all they have, they will figure out ways to use them to create little cities with the train tracks and build little buildings with the blocks. Sometimes we have to prompt that, which I'm going to go to in a later bullet point here. But I find that less toys too does foster that creativity. All right, number 3 is allowing them to be individuals. This is something that I feel like my parents did so well. When I was a teenager, I definitely had some interesting clothing choices. I really desired to be different. It was just, I don't know why, but I just wanted to be different from other people. And so I chose clothes that I would never wear now, and that my mom probably thought, okay, you look silly. You definitely don't look cute. But she never told me that, ever. In fact, she took me to the mall and bought me the weird clothing choices. She didn't make me feel stupid. She just allowed me to express myself. I wore my band t-shirts. It'd be funny if I could drum up some pictures. I'm sure if any of my high school friends are listening to this, they could definitely drum up some pictures for me, but I don't know if I want them. I don't know. Send them my way if you have them, but I am not good about saving photos, so I don't think I really have any. If I find them, I will put them in the show notes or on a blog post. But anyways, the point in all this is that my mom allowed me to be an individual in support of that. She never wanted this picture perfect looking child. She wasn't like, no, we have to look this certain way. She was just like, okay, you want to look like a punk rock kid? Well, then I guess I'll buy you the clothes and buy you the t-shirt. And never made me feel weird about that. And I really try to remember that whenever my kids want to wear certain things. And I'm like, I would really wish you would just wear the pretty Instagram clothes. Instead, I'll just buy them the tacky t-shirt and be like, you know what? This is you being you right now. You won't always dress like this. You'll probably, or maybe you'll be a fashion designer and you're going to dress even crazier. But I just want to support them. Of course, modesty and all of that applies. My parents, I was modest. It was just the clothing choices weren't exactly what everyone else in my peer group was wearing, and that I was supported in that. Also, my sister and I, we had the freedom to decorate our own rooms. And I remember my sister painting every wall a different bright color. I remember on my wall, I had all of these band posters and all of these photos of my friends. I think I put them in like a grid pattern. I remember even taking my bed out and putting my mattress in the closet and sleeping in there. Again, I'm sure some of my childhood friends are laughing. If you listen to this, I know at least one of you does. So anyways, they just let me do all that weird stuff, and I never felt like a weirdo. I felt confident in creating my style in my room, and it was something that I was given freedom to explore. All right, the fourth one is allowing them to do inconvenient things and make messes. This is a challenge. It's a challenge for me as well. I find myself just sometimes flying off the handle. For example, I have one kid who is obsessed with my computer paper. He pulls out a sheet of paper probably 10 times a day, and then he goes and he marks on it and does all this, he doesn't even fill up the whole page. And I think that's what bothers me more than anything else. But the other day I was at Walmart and I realized that a huge pack, I don't know how many pages. Okay, I just confirmed. 96 pages was $6. It's a huge pack that we won't go through in even a month. It was $6, okay? So can I deal with my son pulling a paper out of my office, cutting it up, marking on it, coloring on it for less than $6 a month? Yes, because he is always creating something when he is doing that. Another example would be that my daughter, Johanna, she loves to bake and cook, and she will come in the kitchen and she'll get out random ingredients and make something. Now, it's always been my rule that she has to eat it. So I tell her, make sure that you think through and you're not putting like tuna with chocolate, because you can't waste. I don't want you to waste. Now, if it was just an honest mistake, then fine. Okay, I won't make her eat it. But for the most part, I want her to eat what she's made, even if it isn't the best thing in the world. But I let her experiment and I let her make messes. Our house is always a mess, and I do let my kids make messes. The girls have a sewing machine up in their room. They cut up fabric, they sew it together, they make little bags, little doll clothes, and that is something that I allow them to do. All my kids love costumes and makeup. Every week, my younger sister comes over to watch our kids while we go on a date night, and for whatever reason, they love doing pranks to her or shows. So they are usually, once she gets here, in some kind of costume. They've gotten into the makeup, they've made themselves look like whatever. They have something planned, some kind of show that they've all come together on. They've made a big mess, but they're in some kind of costume. Another is I let my oldest daughter use my camera and my editing software to create videos. She could potentially mess it up. She's pretty responsible with it, and I wouldn't let probably the younger ones do it. But she's taken an interest in creating videos. She does stop motion films. She does little films with her siblings. And it is a project I let her do. I let her use my computer. And yes, it can be inconvenient. And there's times when, no, I need to use the computer or I need to use my camera. But for the most part, they know they have access to all of these supplies and tools to be creative and make something. Okay, the fifth is allowing them to mess up. So this isn't the same as making a mess, but to mess the project up. So I've been to play dates or mom's things where we're making some kind of craft, and there is an example at the front where there's like a paper plate and 2 cotton balls as eyes and a very specific pattern for the nose. And the kids are all expected to make the exact thing that they see. Now, nothing against that. That's fine, whatever. That's fun. But I'm not the mom who is standing there placing the googly eye in the right place at the library event. So there'll be library events and they're making this very specific craft that's supposed to look a certain way. I do not care if my kid's tree looks like a mushroom. I don't care how we walk out of there. If there is googly eyes on the bottom when they're supposed to be on the top, I just let them do it, and I'm not afraid of them messing it up. I think you have to throw perfectionism out and allow them to just try and fail and learn and make imperfect things. I know that me personally, most things that I've learned creatively have come from trying and messing up and not doing it the perfect way. And so I want that same experience for my kids and to allow them to just mess it all up and not do it right. All right, the next, number 6 is follow their lead in what they're interested in. So this kind of goes back to what I just did before, but don't micromanage every little thing that they do. I have this belief, and I could be wrong, but that if you're always telling a kid exactly what to do, now of course schedules and all of that are good, especially for different personality types. I'm not as much of a scheduler, but some people thrive in that environment, but maybe make it more flexible, because I feel like if your entire life you're told exactly what to do and when to do it, later in life you might be waiting for someone to tell you what to do versus taking time and being like, I am going to do this thing. I'm going to have this idea and I'm going to act on it and I'm going to make the thing, versus waiting for somebody to tell you step A, B, C, D. But allowing kids to tell you what they're interested in and helping them to go down that path. So example would be that my child that's interested in video and creating video content, I just give her a camera and say, go make something, and she comes up with a script and she gets her brothers and sisters involved and she sits down at the computer and she edits it, and I don't micromanage that project. That's something that she's interested in, and I am following her lead and providing what she needs to do that. So I will make sure that they have the supplies they need if they're interested in something. With my daughter who likes to cook, I make sure that the supplies are available. Now, there are times when I say no. I don't want to make it sound like I'm always 100% available and open for them, but I make it a point to say yes, even if I think it's kind of a bad idea and I don't think it'll work out. I'm just like, you can try this. Here's the thing. See what you can make with it. They may fail, but they'll learn from that. Kids will create and explore naturally, but I feel like sometimes we force them into certain interests that aren't necessarily theirs, but instead to take what they want to do and then supply that need. And a lot of times I will also I will try to encourage them to keep going. So for example, my son that always gets the paper out, he likes to draw all these crazy creatures and there'll be arms coming out and it's like a monster, and he will hand it to me and say he's done, and I will give it back to him and say, why don't you color this in, color in the background, why don't you add another arm, why don't you see about. I'll try to encourage him to keep working on the project and spend a little bit extra time with it. I'll do the same thing for my daughter. She'll come and have a video. She'll sit the whole family down and show us her finished project. And I'll say, why don't you add another scene and maybe suggest something. That way I can spur her to keep following that interest in a way that helps her to grow the skills even more. But my daughter that does the videos, she knows how to do things in Final Cut Pro 10 that I don't even know how to do. I watch her videos and I think, how did you create that effect? I've never seen that. But it's something that she's had the freedom to explore, and then she even knows how to Google and, find answers for herself. Number 7, and I'm almost done, I have 8, is to give them an idea. So my husband, he's really good at this. He is the one that primarily handles the homeschool, at least for now. That's how it's working out in our family. And lately he's been on a kick with the 30s and the Dust Bowl and just that era of time. And the other day, he gave the kids an assignment to write a song about the Dust Bowl. Well, they ran with that idea. They came down after about an hour. They had on costumes. They had dirt on their face. They used eyeshadow to create dirt. And my daughter even had come down and asked me to print off a music sheet thing so she could write a piano song. I don't play instruments at all, so I don't even know what that's called. But she found on Google where you can, the blank pages for notes. And so I printed her off one of those, and they wrote songs, music, they had a performance, a whole thing. But that was prompted by my husband giving them an idea to create a project that went with the Dust Bowl. And he does that a lot. The other day, we went to a town nearby. It's probably about 30 minutes away. And they have this castle looking structure. And he had the idea that they should make a video where it was like they were finding the castle. And so he prompted that idea. We went there, they shot it, they came up with sort of a script, and then she edited it later. He prompted it, but then allowed them to run with the idea. So giving them an idea sometimes, if maybe they're just feeling like they don't really know where to go, give them a little bit of direction, but then allow them to expound on that. The last one is to be a model. Do you make? Do you create? This can go so many ways. It can be, do you like to cook? Do you like to garden? Do you think of an idea and then put your efforts into creating that idea and making it into a reality? Do they see you think something up, draw it out, and then act on it and turn it into something? Like if kids see adults making just as a regular part of their lives, whether it be creating a pretty birthday party. That's not my thing. That's not what I'm into. But them seeing you have an interest, trying, failing, learning, but creating, I feel like is something that they will model later if they see it modeled to them. I know that when I was a kid, my mom was always making. She was making so many dinners and food. That was something she did all the time out of necessity, but she was constantly cooking. She liked to sew and make our Halloween costumes. She created pretty Easter baskets at Easter time. She always decorated the house for Christmas. But I saw her making and doing and being active. That's not something I really recognized as a creative thing or as being creative when I was a kid. But now I see that was modeled, and I constantly saw her acting on her ideas. Same for my dad. He's creative in his own dad kind of way. I grew up on an elk farm. My dad came up with the idea that he wanted to have 40 head of elk on a farm. So people would be driving down our road, and in the fall, there were bugling elk as if we were out in the middle of Colorado or Montana. So I watched him create businesses, and it's just been around me and something that was modeled to me. And I think that kids really pick up on that. To sum it all up, give kids freedom and space and time and materials. Kids are smart and resourceful. They all are. To me, every human is just so smart. And given the space and given the time and just backing off and creating that boredom will force creativity out of necessity. So I'm just jumping in as I'm editing this podcast because I had a few good examples come up later in the day. A couple days ago, the same day that I actually recorded this podcast, my son was in the kitchen up plucking parsley from my windowsill herb garden, putting it in ice cube trays and making parsley ice cubes. And I was remembering my words from earlier in the day because it was getting kind of messy. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm giving him the space. So we now have a tray full of parsley ice cubes and raisin ice cubes. That sounded like a good idea to him, and so that is what he created. Also, I went up in the girls' room and they were gluing shells to paper. One of them was using the shells as a turtle shell, so drawing turtles around the shells. And they were just making some kind of art, but they were bored and there wasn't much to do because it was cold that day. And so there you go. There's a few real life examples found later in the same day that I made this podcast. Another thing that I feel like I didn't actually touch on much in this episode is the why. Why is it even important to raise creative kids? Why would you care? I'm sure a lot of you have your own reasons for that. But for me, I want to raise problem solvers, the kind of people who, no matter what their interests are, they are in some kind of niche and they see a problem or an opportunity and they know how to move forward and capitalize or advance that, not necessarily monetarily, but in whatever way is applicable to whatever it is. And I think that by doing some of these things in your home, you might raise children who think outside of the box and who are able to do that kind of problem solving. All right, well, that's it. That's what I've learned and what I know about raising creative kids. Clearly, I haven't raised anyone yet. My oldest is 11, so we'll see. But I feel like these are the things that parents have done in the past and that parents now can do to instill creativity in their kids. Okay, and now for today's random Instagram question. Let's see, I think I'm gonna choose this one. What is one thing you think successful people do every day? I think success can be defined a lot of different ways, but it usually is accomplishing something. It might not have anything to do with money or whatever you might think of as success. But I think the one thing that successful people do is have a goal with each day and things that they want to accomplish. And by the end of that day, no matter what happens, they have that accomplished. Or it might be over the course of a year, but having something in front of them that they know they want and then taking the actual actions to do it. Not dreaming, not wishing, but taking the steps. I forget where I saw it recently, but somebody somewhere was saying that it is not unusual to have dreams and goals. Every single human has that. That's totally normal, not special. But what's different is when people have the goal and then they actually take the action on it. And I think that's what makes quote unquote successful people different. I'm sure I'm going to be thinking of other things that I should have said, but that is the first thing that comes to mind when looking at that question. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast. If you found any value in this, I know I say this all the time and it sounds like I am begging, but please, 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 please leave a review because that is what pushes this podcast up on iTunes and helps me to grow. And I just want it to grow so much so I can continue to do this and bring content to you. All right, I will see you in episode 25 of the Simple Farmhouse Life podcast.